Fables and Foibles of Wild Abundance, a permaculture homestead and education center in the mountains of western North Carolina.
There's type 1 error.
No, I could move it. It would be a type 1 error if it was my cabin.
Oh,
In my definition of type 1
I don't
error.
know what that is.
This is just a little building. This is a guest space. It's called the pagoda. So if it was my cabin, that would be a major problem. And if it weighed as much as my cabin because of all that log cabin chinking, that would be a major problem. But luckily, I have friends who are very handy with things and have lots of toys. And so when I realized that it was a foot onto my ex-partner's land, when he pointed it out to me, then I proceeded to find out if I could resolve the problem, and it would only cost me $800. But then the person said that they didn't care anyway, so that's fine. So this is the cabin, and that's the outdoor shower. That's pretty nice, relative location. So stack and pack. So this cabin, which there's some better, I don't know why I didn't put a better picture of it. So the cabin is 12 feet by 16 feet, and it's 2 levels. So that's like under 400 square feet. That's pretty great for 1 person. For 2 people, that's pretty tight in my experience. And especially 3 people, you know, but it's very small. So we ended up we're putting an addition on it. But when you live and design in such a small space, it's really important that you design very precisely. It's amazing when I go to people's houses that have like a normal, like an 800 square foot house. I'm like, wow, you can just put a bed there and a desk there and your couch over there, and then you can have a pile of stuff, and it doesn't get in your way. It's amazing. It's amazing. But when you're building everything by hand, and especially when you have these crazy ethics that are like no plywood and stuff like this, and you're like having to shave all of your logs and drag them out of the forest and try to wrangle your buddy into dragging them with you so you're not like one person trying to drag the log. Like, you want to build a pretty small house, and especially if you're lifting those logs by hand, when you get bigger than 12 by 16, can you imagine having like a 30-foot log? And it's very challenging. So, it was small, and so it had to be designed really, really well. So there's certain things like this, like that I like to call, well, that's a permaculture principle, stacking and packing. So notice the couch under the stairs, and then check this out. The shelves under the stairs. And notice that the shelves are specifically sized for different sized jars and books. It's very good. This special cubby for my printer in my office so I don't have to look at it. Relative location, so with the cabin, I put this covered porch, and then that covered porch, see, this is very smart. So when I was building the cabin, I put a ledger board in as I was putting on my siding so that I would have something to attach a roof to later. Because I was like, I think someday I might want to have a covered porch here. And that made things really easy because then I didn't have to tear down my siding to attach that new roof. And then when I was designing the covered porch, I was like, someday I might want to make this covered porch into an addition. And so when I did the timber frame, or when my friend did the timber frame, I had him place the beams so that they would be visible on the inside of the addition and be able to be wrapped around on the outside of the addition by straw clay, which is this natural building technique that we're using. And Kate has been a big part of making happen. And so I left the front part of the porch open because I love having a little mud room, and I like stacking firewood on the porch. Does anyone like walking out into the rain to get firewood? Or walking, my ex's place, we had to walk down the stairs to get firewood and then bring up the stairs. Is that fun? No. So another very smart thing was putting in this little tiny, tiny road with this little tractor. It was before I was okay with bulldozers or anything on my land. For my little 4-wheel drive pickup truck to be able to come above my cabin to drop off building supplies and firewood. This is very smart. Do I use that road all the time? Do I want to have like cars in my space? No. But being able to at least bring supplies is really important. And who knows, maybe when I'm a little older, I will want to drive there. So, relative location, notice the public library of Wild Abundance. Its location in the shitter. Very good. I mean, the two functions go really well together, unless you're outside and someone's taking like an hour in the toilet. And you're like, okay, buddy.
It's a good book.
Put down the book. So this is really fun. And this guy, Kyle Harris, who came through the land, built this, and we designed it together. So there's water catchment off the roof of the composting toilet, and it goes into this barrel, and then there's a foot-operated hand washing station. So, and this is really important, like someone mentioned, like disease, bringing disease on the land. So hand washing is like one of the #1 things to prevent people getting sick. And so this has been really good to have a foot operated, so there's no hands on anything, thing right at the point of use.
Does it work year round?
No, but we don't have guests there in the winter.
Oh.
So, oh, that's a really important detail is like, so Wild Abundance, part of that public-private sector thing is I have very strong boundaries around not having workshops there or classes or apprentices in the wintertime. And that really helps me to recharge. And it also is very good as far as infrastructural costs, because creating insulated classrooms is pretty expensive. So what was awesome and what I would change about forest management on the land, and this was supposed to have this picture of all these logs that we just harvested. We just did, I don't have any pictures of this, but we just did, so this land was a dairy farm, and it was a dairy farm until probably 30, 40 years ago. And then all the land surrounding my land is filled with hardwoods, all the forests. But my land has a bunch of pine trees there. Why do you think that that is? They are pioneers. They're totally pioneers. And so if you cut down a hardwood forest and then you leave it alone, what happens? It regenerates because you're basically not killing most of the trees. You're coppicing them. So they shoot up from the roots. But if you cut down a forest and you bring in dairy cows for 50 years, they keep eating back any growth that might come up. And so then the trees that come in are going to be pioneers that spread easily from seed and that can tolerate soil compaction. And so we have a lot of pine trees. This is actually a picture of a more hardwoody part of my land. But there's a lot of pine trees that are about ranging from like this big to like this big on the land. And so we have been doing some projects of small canopy, we've been opening up canopy gaps that are all pines, and we're using that to build buildings with, because pine is a lot easier to put a nail into than anyone ever tried that? Not very fun. But, and then we're replanting all of that with hybrid chestnuts and oaks, which is pretty dry. So they're meant for forests. So this is a picture of some of the scrubby land. So I advise everyone, not everyone, but most people who want to interact with their forest a lot, I encourage them to buy damaged forest. Like, I don't think it's a good idea to get like super intact forest and then go messing around a bunch of it. Like, way better to get forest that you can help, you know, that you can be a positive influence on, rather than getting forest that is already doing pretty well and you're just going to screw it up. Does that make sense? Resonate? It's nice to have intact forest that you can go to and like have, or I need that, maybe you don't. So this is an example of how incredibly overcrowded a lot of the forest was when I bought the land. And then this is what we've been doing, which is really awesome. And this picture doesn't really do it justice. We've been doing a lot of thinning, and this has been happening since I first moved there. In fact, Lewis and I did some years and years ago, of thinning out species that we don't really want that much of, like white pines. They're really common. White pines and red maple primarily. And then using them for different purposes on the land, and then also piling brush on contour. So what do you think that brush on contour is doing for the land?
Erosion crops.
It is stopping erosion, and it is helping soil build up in these cool little terraces. And this is actually happening. Like, I can go to places that we put the brush on contour like 3 or 4 years ago and see that soil is being built. It's pretty awesome. And it feels so good to be like, wow, I am doing my land good, you know? Do you guys get warm, fuzzy feelings? Yeah, I mean, there isn't really a warmer, fuzzier feeling, I don't think. And this is like, it's pretty fun too. You can do it, like occasionally there'll be big groups of people that come to my land, either because there's a class I'm putting on or someone else organizing some service project or whatever. And it's really important to have projects that are ready to go at a moment's notice. Like, oh, hey, I was thinking about bringing a group of teenagers there tomorrow. You got something we can do? And it's like, yes, I do. I have the perfect thing to do, and I've even put flags in the woods on contour lines, so they're ready to go. So that is a really great way of catching and storing energy, which is another permaculture principle you might not have thought of. This is pretty fun. These are, who here has had so if you're gonna grow perennials, do you think you should buy all of them retail? Or do you think you should propagate them? Yeah, okay, we're all together. So who has watered a tree nursery out in the open before? Yeah, and how often do you have to water it?
Once, twice a day.
Yeah, once, twice a day. So I water my nursery never. And the way that I do this is I've made these swales and berms right behind my cabin in the forest. And then the water that's caught off of, I keep on pointing it, should point up here. The water that's caught off of these gutters is directed into those berms, and that's where the plants are. So when there's a big rain, it floods the berms and the pots get flooded. And that seems to be, I mean, not all the plants like that. Grapes don't like it. But almost all the plants love it. And it's been such a time saver. Like, I don't have time to water a nursery. If I had to water a nursery, the nursery would die. But this is something that has been just super successful. And I would really recommend doing it, but I would not recommend putting jujubes or grapes in it.
I didn't quite understand what you, oh, there, now it's close enough. Okay.
Isn't that cool? So we also, we made enough space, so we had work traders make these who are from the Firefly Gathering, which is this event that I put on, because we wanted to give plants as gifts to the instructors, and we needed to buy them in the early springtime and needed somewhere to store them. So it was pretty cool because I got these like permanent infrastructure done, and Firefly got all these awesome gifts for teachers. And this video was made by Wild Abundance, where we teach skills for self-sufficiency,
like homesteading, permaculture, woodcraft, wild foods, and tiny house and natural building, all in the beautiful mountains around Asheville, North Carolina. Check out wildabundance.net to learn more about our classes and consultations.